Welcome to OkState Daily. Casey Porter here. So glad that you decided to tune in, joined as I am each and every week by Robbie Rainwater. Coach, it was a busy week last week, high-level competition, some big-time disappointments, but overall you got to like the fact that the Cowboys bounced back on Sunday. But overall, man, it was a tough week, not going to lie about it.
Yeah, and one of the things that was, stood out to me was it was against our best. You know what I mean? Whether, you get the walk-off against Benj against Dallas Baptist or, we get beat in the Friday game where we throw, in my opinion, our best arms, whether, Sam Garcia starts the game and then Krantz and Molsky and Blake come in. And so that's tough for a ball club, but like you said, it's good to see them bounce back and have some resiliency and get come back and win the ball game on Sunday. But yeah, that's a tough two-game stretch right there where you get beat in late innings against your best arm. So, but that's not indicative of any concern or anything like that. That's just a game of baseball.
It is. If you play long enough, you have disappointments like that, and you felt like you had a lot of momentum going into Tuesday, and you really felt like, hey, going into the weekend. Of course, OU swept BYU last weekend, so they created some separation at the top. It was a huge week because you felt like if you could beat Dallas Baptist, then have a good weekend at K-State, not only could you get back to the top of the standings in the Big 12, you would set yourself up to host a regional. So there was just a lot of reasons why last week that it's hard to bounce back from, but the Cowboys have to do that.
Yeah, and talking about hosting a regional and that sort of thing, it's pretty apparent that, Dallas Baptist and Oklahoma State's going to be in regional conversations and pairings with each other for now and the near future. And, so going into the Tuesday game where, whatever projection you're looking at, either Dallas Baptist was a 1 seed and Oklahoma State was a 2 seed or vice versa, had huge implications in that game. And so, just a lot of good baseball being played and a lot of implications on the line this time of year. And I look at the Big 12 standings and I don't know how much you can look at that when not everybody plays the same teams.
Yeah,
you know
correct.
what I mean? And
Good
so
point.
that's a little bit of, and I haven't done a comparison on OU schedule versus OSU schedule when it comes to Big 12 competition, that sort of thing. But, it's there for seedings in the Big 12 tournament and that sort of thing. But I don't know how much that's looked upon. For example, what's TCU sitting at the bottom of the Big 12 standings right now, and they're projected to be a 3 seed in the regionals. So, so there's a lot of
OU got in ahead of K-State last year, although K-State finished ahead of them and beat them last year.
So I don't, looking at the RPI and rankings and the regional projections and Big 12 standings, you can shuffle those in a multitude of different ways and look at that. But, looking at a game-by-game basis where, the positive on the Dallas Baptist, it was a lot better ball game than the last time we played them, right? And
so, sure was.
And so
it was great baseball. It was high-level college baseball.
It was. And, anytime you have two quality teams playing each other and both of them have aluminum bats in their hands, anything can happen, right? And so, it's a little bit of a disappointment, I know, to the team and the players when, you run your best arms out there and get beat in late innings. But, that's not – I don't think that's indicative of any concern that you could have moving forward.
So to use a basketball comparison – a lot of times you get beat by a shot at the buzzer and you forget about the 1-and-1s that you missed earlier in that half, right?
Yeah.
So Oklahoma State, obviously you had the big home run in the top of the 9th inning after Nolan Schubert had just come up. So clutch. That was the gut punch to it, as you felt like, hey, we came through. It was clutch. We did what we were supposed to. We got our dude on the bump. Okay, but you forget, in the 4th inning, the Cowboys really had a chance to extend their lead. They scored the 3 runs in the 1st inning. And when you don't create separation with a team as good as Dallas Baptist, it most times comes back to haunt you.
Yeah, and we talked about that last week about it's kind of been, I don't know if motto is the right word, but OSU's kind of seemed to do something early and do something late, but a lot of guys left on have a lull in the middle innings, right? And that came back to bite them this weekend, or particularly against Dallas Baptist in the midweek. So, but yeah, it's one of those things when we've talked about that. We've talked about timely hits, right? We've talked about that since the beginning of the season. Timely hits, and it's going to come down to, in these in the schedule, when you have a schedule that is full of, the quality competition that the Big 12 presents and the quality opponents that you're playing midweek, a lot of times it's going to come down to who got the timely hits, and Dallas Baptist did. And even on top of us getting the timely hit, like you said, with Schubert coming up and hitting the home run. So, but yeah, it's quality competition and coming up with the timely hits and minimizing the runners left on base is very important.
So you have the ninth inning home run for Dallas Baptist. You lose that game. That's disappointing. And then Friday, man, again. And here, I'll say this, okay? And, hey, we give our opinions on how we think things are. I've said in the past that I feel like sometimes with Rob Walton, OSU pitchers nibble a little bit too much to the perimeter. They get behind the count. Too many sliders, not enough fastballs. Hey, there's an argument to be had for all of those different conversations.
Sure.
And we don't shy away from them, right? So whenever we give our opinion, it is what it is. It's not sugar-coated. So I'll say this, man. Okay, you had Binge that gave up the home run in the ninth inning. You used Crayons on Tuesday. You'd already used Crayons on Friday. Tommy Molsky's last hitter that he faced in, the 11th, the 12th inning, was a strikeout. He had been shoving. And so Rob Walton did everything he could. He mapped everything out absolutely perfectly. The matchups on Sunday were beautiful, how he did that with Blake and Phillips. But just going through Friday, I know it was like, hey, well, why do we leave in Molsky? Who are you going to – I mean, you just seen Binge give up a home run in the ninth inning. You already used Tommy Crane. Molsky had just struck the guy out to finish the last inning. Absolutely, you roll Tommy Molsky back out there. Sure. Rob Walton did everything right this weekend.
Yeah, and I think it shows you how important both sides felt like the Friday game was.
Yeah.
Right? And especially at OSU. And that not only do you have your typical Friday starter in Sam Garcia, but you bring in Krantz, Drew Blake, and Molsky to try and finish it up. I mean, it was very obvious that Friday game was very important, and so, no, I don't – anybody that and I've said it the last couple of podcasts of that, early in the season, Molsky was maybe a 40, 50 pitch guy, and then he kind of lose control. And that we felt like as the season went on that he was, more of a 60 to 75 pitch guy. I have no problem with him coming back out in the last inning. I've said it all along. He's probably my favorite pitcher to watch and gets the job done and stuff like that. So I don't have any problem with the way that was structured. And I think they did a great job. It's just, that's the way the chips fell, like I said earlier, anytime a team is big enough and good enough to put on a uniform and walk up to a plate with aluminum bat, anything can happen in this sport. And so, I just think, you have two tough games back to back where you bring in your best that you've got and it just didn't work out. So, but that's not, like I said, it's not indicative of any questioning that anybody should have. And if anybody's out there questioning, bringing Molsky back out in the last inning or that sort of thing, then
I've heard it.
In my opinion, they haven't been watching the same season I have.
Yeah, no doubt. As a matter of fact, Tommy Molsky went 4 innings against TCU. So talking about the 3-inning stint, he went 4 innings scoreless against TCU. He also went 3 2/3 innings just the weekend prior against Cincinnati. So there was history of Tommy Molsky having success in 3-inning plus stints. So that was 100%, absolutely, totally and entirely the right move to go out there, to send Molsky back out there and ride it. So you have the ninth inning home run on Tuesday, the walk-off on Friday. Coach, even for the most elite positive thinkers, the most elite competitors, the most mentally tough human beings in the world, Saturday was going to be tough, man. I mean, that was just going to be tough.
It sure was. Yep. And you could feel it coming. You could see it coming.
Oh, yeah.
You know what I mean? I mean, there's anybody that's played this sport or coached this sport or both or whatever, been around the sport, knows those type of things are going to happen. That you have two tough back-to-back losses that have a lot of implications, that you have the lead going into the last inning. There's going to be a day where, not too far behind that, where there's going to be the type of situation you had on Saturday. So you could see that coming. When, again, I'm going to keep saying it, not anything that's a concern moving forward.
Yeah, right.
But, we're 1 or 2 pitches away from, maybe sweeping that series. And so,
and the week.
in the week. And so that's what you're going to get when you play a tough competition, tough schedule, and you schedule tough midweek games, and you're playing in the Big 12 and aluminum bats and wind blowing and everything else combined. When you get somebody like Benj up there that's throwing 95, 96 miles an hour, it takes one half swing to barrel one up for it to fly out of the ballpark. And so anyway, not any concern. The more concerning part would be to me is that anybody out there that has any questions on why we're bringing Molsky back out or people like that. I mean,
come on, man.
That's crazy. That's crazy. And so we got a chance to go out and get on the board and win the first game of a series, and we're running our best pitchers out there. We've talked about on this podcast of, who we think maybe has the biggest upside, whether it's on the offensive side or the pitching side, whatever the case is. And Molsky's name is right at the top of that list of somebody that's got the stuff to pitch at the next.
And beyond that, who else are you going to bring in? Benj? I mean, you just saw it Tuesday, right? Plus, he's been playing. He's exhausted. I mean, did you see him leave the field Sunday after he made that last out? That was an exhausted young man.
Yeah. So anyway, anybody that's questioning that, exhausted young man, it makes me think of, going back to a high school football game in the state championship where our safety was also our running back, and he was dead tired and knocks down a pass at the end of the game, and it was all he could do was to stand up at the end of the ball game. And that being a kid named Luke Davis, you know who I'm talking about. So anyway, that's the same. Those kids are not just physically exhausted; they're emotionally exhausted. And 2 tough ball games like that, and just the resiliency to come back and win that Sunday game was great to see. Yeah, you'd like to see win a series or even potentially sweep a series, but man, to have the week that we did and still be at the top, not in the number 1 position in the Big 12 standings, but still be at the top of the order in the Big 12 standings, still got some baseball to play and see where the chips fall. And even after this week, if you go in, going into that Sunday game, they were showing graphics that they still had OSU as a potential number 1 seed in hosting the regional. So that just speaks to the quality of or the quality that others out there think that OSU is, and I think the same thing. And we've talked about for a long time getting hot in the middle late, and I think that's been very difficult for OSU because it seems like right when you start to get hot, you have another injury, whether it be Wolford or Miola, and it's just been constant this year of having to reshuffle the lineup because of a nagging injury that keeps popping up, or somebody, twisting a hand or wrist or whatever the case is. So, I think the coaching staff's doing a great job with the kids, and the kids are performing. And what we talked about, for the last 2 or 3 weeks of next man up and creating those individual competitions inside the team concept that allows kids to be successful when they're inserted in the lineup. One of the things that I noticed, because like we've talked about on this podcast numerous times, or at least I have, is the amount of contribution you have from the role player, so to speak, the kids on the team that may not be the high, prospects and that sort of thing. If you go back and look, whether you're talking about Forsyth or Ortiz or LaSalle or Kroll, those type of guys that, that we've talked about over and over again of kind of being the heartbeat of the team. You go back and look at the first 2 games of the series against Kansas State, and that portion of your lineup was 1 for 25.
Yep.
Okay. In game 3, that portion of your lineup is 5 for 9.
Yep.
And so, what it tells me is exactly what we've been talking about for this entire year, right? Of the value that the Forsyths and Ortizes and the Krolls and those role players, the value that they bring to the team, that if they're having an off day, we talked about early in the season that if Benj wasn't producing, that we were going to have a hard time winning, right? That table has turned over the last several weeks in saying, if our role players aren't producing, we're going to have a hard time winning.
Agreed.
Right? And even going back to the Dallas Baptist game, right? If you combine Dallas Baptist and the first 2 games of the Kansas State series, that portion of our lineup, whether you're talking about Kroll or Forsyth, Ortiz, LaSalle, if you're talking about that portion lineup, Rich, we're 2 for 31.
Yeah.
2 for 31. if you go to game,
that's not to throw shade. That's just a fact. It happens.
This is actually a compliment.
Yes.
Right? And if you look at game 3, that portion of your lineup is 5 for 9, and Benj and Schubert and Earhart are 0 for 12.
There you go.
And so,
and which game do we win?
And which game do we win? And it speaks volumes to the value that those guys bring. And going back to what we've said over and over and over again, what's one of the beautiful things about college baseball is that a lot of times the guys that are listed as your high prospects or high draft picks, a lot of times don't produce any more than your guys that aren't. And this is the heartbeat of your team, right? When you're talking about Kroll's and the Forsyths and Ortiz and those type of guys, in that if they're struggling, it's going to be hard for OSU. Schubert and those guys have nobody to drive in if those guys aren't on base.
Yeah, right. Absolutely.
And so I thought it was very interesting to just, again, give a shout out to that portion of the team and the portion of the lineup of how valuable they are to this team, in that when they go 5 for 9 in game 3, we win, even if you're big guys, even if your middle of your lineup goes over 12.
Yep.
Right.
Yep.
And so, like you said, not casting shade in any way, shape, fashion, form. It's actually a huge compliment to that group of guys and the value they bring to the lineup and to the team, of that this team counts on them. This team needs them. This team succeeds when they're successful. And if they're struggling, then this team is struggling. And so I love that portion of it, just because, like we talked about last time, those are the guys that we can identify with the most of any Division I kid. If we can identify with any Division I athlete, those are the guys that we can identify with, And so, again, just speaks volumes to, how valuable they are to the team. And when you're watching a ball game and you see Kroll and Forsyth get on base and Ortiz getting hits, and not to mention how good a weekend Ian Doherty had at the plate,
a week.
And so, just again, I love watching that portion. And so moving forward, everybody should be excited anytime that those guys are producing and getting on base.
Yeah. And the thing about it is, we've been in those games where they go sideways and there's just no positive mojo to the dugout and all that. Yeah. And quite honestly, as a coach, you have no earthly idea what to say, because there is nothing you can say to change that exact moment. I mean, you can rip and roar and holler, and you can try to be psychological, of which all of us coaches, we've tried every single tactic in the past, right? Yeah. And bottom line is, really at that moment in that game, like on Saturday, nothing works, right? But Josh did know the message to give to those kids for Sunday. Hey, it is what it is. Wash it, move on. Today sucked. Whatever this may be. But tomorrow's a huge game, man. Yep. Tomorrow's a gut check. We need to go back to our process, work on, not necessarily results, because the results haven't been good. Let's go back to worrying about the details in the process that have created positive results in the past. I think he shifted the mindset to that type of thinking, and that's when Josh Holliday's at his best.
Yeah, and just from a spectator point of view, right, from somebody outside, what Josh is excellent at is not allowing your team to be on an emotional roller coaster.
Correct.
Right.
Correct.
And, we talk about a lot when we were coaching of humble the kids when they're really, really high, build them up where they're really, really low. And so that they kind of stay in the middle at all times. Yep. Right. Because, in this sport, there's going to be the highs, there's going to be the real lows. And what you can't be doing is, if your kids or your team is in a real low, you can't be trying to humble them when they're in the low, right? You can't be hollering at them, rooting and roaring, and telling them everything that they're doing wrong when they're in the low. You got to be building them up, right? Because the physical errors are going to happen, and there's going to be times where the physical error sometimes turns into the mental errors, right? And you have the lapse and the frustration and that sort of thing. So I think what this staff is really, really good at, along with the other things that we've talked about, they're good at, but obviously keeping those kids off the emotional roller coaster so that they're able to go out and compete and be successful game in and game out, right? Because it's real easy to get real high and not, nitpick the little things that they're doing wrong when things are going well, but you have to, right? Yep. So that those things don't turn into, something really bad when it's low. Same thing on the opposite end of the spectrum is that you can't be nitpicking and hollering and rooting and roaring and coming out of the dugout and, hollering at kids halfway between the first baseline and the dugout when things are going bad, right? You got to build them up. So,
yeah, they know they're going bad. They're the first ones to know it.
Yeah, and
they know it better than you do.
Yeah, that. you don't need to go out and tell a kid that the wind's blowing out and when they misplayed a fly ball. He knows it.
Right.
He knew it as soon as he misplayed it, right? And so
and feels worse about it than anybody.
Yeah. And so anyway, I think they do a great job of keeping kids off. Baseball's so much different than any other sport in that, in football, if you're struggling, there's always somebody to go take your frustration out on and hit.
Yeah, right.
Whether it's a late hit or
it's more hidden,
or you're blindsiding somebody. But very rarely does anybody remember when the tight end missed a block, right? But they'll remember every time a kid dropped a pass, because when the ball is thrown, everybody is watching that kid, whether he caught the ball or not. Even if somebody missed a block, or nobody cares about the wide receiver that ran the wrong route on the other side of the field. They don't even know that it happened, right? But in this sport, where do you take your frustration out when you're swinging and missing? Right? Where do you take your frustration out when you're struggling? Because you can struggle just as much defensively as you can offensively sometimes, right? You can get in a rut. I mean, the name that comes to mind is Chuck Knobloch, right?
Yeah.
You can get in a rut where you're booting ground balls and that sort of thing, or not making the plays you should. So anyway, I think they do a great job. You hear Josh Holiday on TV or radio hollering good from the dugout, whether the game's going well or game's not going well. And so it just, again, it speaks to the psychological side that the coaching staff understands with these kids, of keeping them off an emotional roller coaster and keeping them humble and nitpick the things that they're doing wrong when things are going well, and do a little bit more build up and encouragement and positive when things are not. So anyway, that's why I'm a huge OSU fan, I guess.
Yeah, and I'm a huge Josh Holiday fan. I will not ever apologize for that. I just think he does a wonderful job. I think he's a great fit. He's done a great job at OSU. I would like OSU to bust through and get to the College World Series again, but you got to understand, man, it's a lot harder now than it ever has been in the past. There's parity. There's an extra round to it. Hey, you mentioned Ian Doherty, 6 hits last week, 2 home runs in the 4 games he played in, and he has 3 in his last 5 games, 3 home runs, that is. He also had 5 RBIs, and he brought the bullpen home. That was the big deal, man. OSU was running out of gas. Jackson Kroll hit a big home run. Colin Brigham hit a big home run. It felt like K-State was just nipping at OSU's heels all day Sunday. Probably the biggest thing that happened on Sunday is, man, the bullpen brought it home for you, right?
Yeah. And, it's not by accident that we've mentioned Ian Doherty's name the last 3 podcasts, right, of the role that he's playing and the value he's bringing to the team, not just defensively, but at the plate, and I think if you went back and watched a game on demand or whatever the case 6-7 weeks ago and watched Ian Doherty walk to the plate, how much different that looks with the confidence that he's carrying the bat to the plate with now. And so that's great to see, just from the things that we talked about of being an Oklahoma kid and somebody that we've watched play through high school and being able to watch him have success at OSU and be somebody that is counted on. How great is it that you've got Ian Doherty in the line hole, right? And hitting at the bottom of your lineup. And so anyway, that just great to see the success he's having right now and the confidence he has at the plate, not just behind the dish defensively, but when he brings it back to the plate.
Absolutely. So Oklahoma State, they continue to move on, and they had the series last week with K-State, and then they play ORU in Tulsa tonight, and then they move on to a big series over the weekend with BYU. Then you have the third or fourth game this year with Wichita State is your next Tuesday game. Yep. Then the big weekends with Texas at Texas. Then you finish at Texas Tech. So still, hey, you can still catch OU. Yep. Everything is right there in front of you. And this is a team, we're going to leave final thoughts with kind of what our theme has been in this podcast throughout the year. This is a team totally capable of catching fire at the right time of this season.
Yep. And, I don't think yet this season we've been hot with the pitching staff and the offensive side at the same time. And when that happens, and I truly believe it's going to happen, we've talked about going several weeks back that no matter how good a team you have in this sport, you're going to go through a slump, right?
Absolutely.
And we've been in the slump offensively at times, and I think right now you're seeing a little bit of a slump pitching wise, and I don't think that's anything that's being done wrong or anything like that. It's just the nature of this game. And if we can get hot at the plate and our pitching staff gets back to they were, 3-4 weeks ago, this team's got a real chance to make a lot of noise in the postseason, and especially if they host at home and we get the type of crowds and the support that we did at the Bedlam series and quite frankly throughout all the series at one point in time, there's been good crowds. So I still firmly believe that this team is very capable of achieving whatever goals that they set and getting hot at the right time, and we get the offensive side going at the same time that the pitching staff's going, and it can be dangerous. Because if you want to look at Dallas Baptist, right, what Dallas Baptist hasn't seen is Sam Garcia, Brian Holiday, or Gabe Davis, or any of our weekend rotation guys. So I think you got to throw that in the mix too of looking at those type of quality midweek opponents. Of what do those games look like when you're throwing your top 3 starters, right? And so I think that we got a potential to see that in the postseason, and it'll be interesting to see how it shakes out.
No doubt about it. Thanks, Coach, for joining. I want to thank all of you wonderful Oklahoma State fans out there for tuning in as well. A huge series for softball this weekend, too, so make sure and check in with that. So thanks again for tuning in, and go Pokes.
Go Pokes.